I have a permit driver in our house right now, so I'm learning the art of faith by sitting in the passenger seat and having no control. And we're learning the ins and outs of the rules and then the signs of the road, kind of what they mean and how to respond to them. And the yield sign is one of those that's maybe a little bit more tricky. It's not straightforward. It doesn't mean necessarily to come to a full stop. It doesn't mean a green light. It's kind of the in-between, kind of the wait and see sign, kind of see what's happening and slow down, and then give way to someone else. If someone else is coming, you slow down, you wait, you watch, and then you get in behind them. So the yield sign is a little bit trickier. There's a bit more of an art to it. And my contention today is that the Christian life requires you to yield. Very simply, it just is a yield sign, to watch for God's will and His way, to watch for it, and then to follow in behind. Let Him go first, you follow. You set aside your choice and your control and your preferences. You set those aside and you yield to Him first. He gets the right of way first. And so really in many ways you could talk about faith or the Christian life as a yield sign. Now, to be honest, in our modern culture, that's a rather offensive proposition, that you would yield to someone else. Personal choice is probably one of the highest values in American culture. We're in an election year. We get to choose. We're a democracy. So personal choice, it's a high value. I get to choose. You go to the grocery store. You need some salsa. You don't just have one choice. You don't just go grab the salsa off the shelf. There are 67 kinds of salsa. You get a choice. Kids' TV shows and movies, they reinforce it from an early age. Be who you want to be. Follow your dreams. You get to choose your destiny. Find yourself. You get to choose. Now, I'm not saying that choice is entirely bad or that God doesn't give us choice in anything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is when personal choice is God, where it becomes the ultimate and it supersedes everything else. And you put everything else under your personal choice, where it becomes the ultimate right. And in a culture where choice is king, to yield is heresy. If you say, I yield to someone else, it could be seen as oppressive or not living your authentic self if you yield to someone else. So let me show you what yielding looks like. In the three readings for today, there's a thread of yielding in each of the texts, and I'm going to show you that. The first one, we get the boy Samuel. He's like an apprentice to the priest Eli in the temple. And so it's nighttime, he goes to bed, and he happens to be sleeping in the temple that night. Eli goes to his room, and in the middle of the night, the boy wakes up to a voice calling his name, Samuel. Samuel. And he wakes up, and he goes into Eli's room, and he wakes up the old man, and he says, "Here I am." And Eli wakes up kind of annoyed. He takes the CPAP off his face, and he says, "I don't know what, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." And he goes back to bed. And then it happens again and again. And finally, Eli realizes the Lord is calling this young man. And so he sends him back. And the next time Samuel hears his voice, or hears the voice calling his name, not only does he say, "Here I am," he goes on to say, "Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening." And this would become kind of the mantra of Samuel's life. His whole ministry as a prophet would be one where he would simply yield to whatever God said. Now, Samuel didn't say, "Hey, speak, Lord, as long as it's something that I want to do. Speak, Lord, as long as it kind of fits into my dreams for my life. Speak, Lord, as long as it kind of gives me a good career and I can climb the ladder." No, he just said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Whatever you want, whatever you say, Say it, and I'll follow. Say it, and I'll do it. Say it, and I will say it to your people, even if it's difficult, even if it's hard. Samuel's ministry was one of yielding. Here I am. Speak. Whatever you say, I'll do it. Then we get to the Gospel of John in the first chapter. We get one of those accounts where Jesus calls his first disciples. And he calls his disciples, in all the Gospels, he uses this simple term, follow me, 2 words. And for the most part, what's amazing, all the Gospels kind of tell us that for the most part, the disciples appear to have just done it. He says, follow me, and they leave everything, and they follow him. It's kind of a strange instance in each of the Gospels. There is one, a little bit of a hesitant disciple, Nathanael. We get him in John chapter 1. So others are just responding, and then Philip tells his friend Nathanael that I found the one, the guy, the chosen one, the Son of God, the Messiah. And his name is Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael has questions. He says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? As if, imagine somebody told you that the Savior of the world is going to come from St. Louis. You'd be like, can anything good come from my town? Or can anything good come from Dittmer or Arnold or, you name it? You'd be like, no, that's crazy. So Nathanael then meets Jesus of Nazareth, and Jesus said, oh, Nathanael, I saw you under the fig tree when you were sitting there. And it's funny because it's a very small little detail, and Nathanael, just with that, says, oh my gosh, yes, you are the Son of God. You are the one. And Jesus says, you're going to see greater things than these. Follow me. And then Nathanael, like all the other first disciples, he yields to those 2 words. We don't have any sense that the disciples said, well, I'll follow you as long as it's part of me living out my authentic self. Or I'll follow you as long as it makes financial sense. Or I'll follow you as long as it kind of fits into my career plans. No, we get the sense that they just left everything and followed and even sacrificed and lost to do that following. They yielded. The final text, the epistle today, St. Paul writes it, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And he says something, again, that is offensive to our modern sensibilities. He says, you are not your own. You are not your own. And you say, wait a minute. I am my own. This is my life. I have control over it. I have choice. I have agency in my life. I can forge my own path. I can be who I want to be. Who are you to tell me that I am not my own? Again, this is kind of like a high value in American culture. You have your life. You're responsible for it. You can do what you want with it. But Paul says you are not your own. You were bought with a price. To yield is to say, I am not my own. I belong to another. A creator, a redeemer who bought me back. If I have any choice, it's always subordinate to this one, the one that I belong to, the other. And so in each of these texts, we have a sense of yielding to another, of following in behind him first. He gets the right of way, setting aside even our choice, our preferences, our control, giving it up for him first. C.S. Lewis, the great writer, probably maybe the greatest Christian writer of the 20th century, said that his great inspiration as a writer, his greatest inspiration was George MacDonald, who was a writer and a minister in the 19th century. George MacDonald says something that I think gets at what we're talking about when we say yield. He once wrote this: "The self is given to us that we may sacrifice it. It is ours that we, like Christ, may have something to offer. We are no more to think, what should I like to do? But what would the living one have me do? You are not your own. Your very self has been given to you, and given that you might actually sacrifice it, that you might give it away as your Lord has done. And when that happens, you ask different questions. You don't ask, well, what do I want to be? Or what do I want? And MacDonald says the question is flipped from, what should I like to do? And now instead the question is, what would God have me do? It's a reorientation, a recalibration of a question when you yield. Pastor Nathan works with college students a lot. As you know, our Reliant campus is nestled, kind of tucked in the St. Louis University campus right on the edge. And so he sees a lot of college students naturally and ministers to a lot of students. And as he's meeting with college students, he's finding that a lot of college students today feel this intense pressure to choose and to choose right. Because their entire lives they've been told, be who you want to be. What do you want to be? You get to choose. It's wide open. The opportunities are endless. You get to write your own story. And so every student goes to college thinking, okay, it's wide open. I got to figure this out. Sometimes we think that choice is a great freedom, but it can actually be a great burden. And so he has students coming to him who are depressed or overwhelmed or confused because they've always been told, what do you want to be? Be who you want. And now they're kind of paralyzed by that. They say, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I choose the wrong path? What if I choose the right path, but what if I'm not good enough at it? Or what if I don't get the internship or the right degree or the right job? What if I don't choose right? When it's all on you and you are the king and you get to choose, boy, there is a lot of pressure to choose correctly and not to choose wrong. So when Pastor Nathan meets with college students who are wrestling with this, he reframes their vision, kind of causes them to stand in a different place by asking different questions. He asks them yield questions. Instead of what do I want to be, he asks these three questions. First of all, what does God want? Over what you want, what does God want? Have you ever asked him? Have you ever just said, I have an important decision to make, God, what do you want? What is your will? Second, what do others need? What do others need over and above how much money can I make? Or what's going to be the funnest job or the greatest status? What do others need? And finally, then, what gifts do I have? What gifts do I have to share? What am I good at that God has given to me that I might give it to others? And in these three questions, he reframes the question of what do I want to be? And all these questions are yield questions. I've shared with you before, I've spent some time in monasteries. You're probably tired of hearing about it. You're like, well, Pastor Jeff, why don't you just go live in a monastery? But my wife wants me to do that some days, to get out of the house. When I went to I learned a little bit about yielding in monasteries. It's very interesting. It's countercultural. In a religious order, you take vows to a particular rule of life, and you live according to that rule in a community. That's what a monastery is. You don't have to be a priest to do it. They're called brothers or sisters if you just make vows and you live according to this rule of life. And in a particular religious order or community, the leader of that community is called an abbot. One of the communities I was in, it was Abbot Joel. And abbot comes from the word Abba, or father. So the abbot is kind of the father of this kind of family that forms in a religious community. So Abbot Joel was the abbot of a particular monastery. And what's interesting is that whenever you have a big decision to make in a monastery, you don't make that decision on your own. You never do. You can't just say, I want to go do this, and do it. You have to ask the abbot. You have to consult your abbot, Abbot Joel. So if you want to get a degree and go to school, you've got to talk to Abbot Joel first. If you want to change jobs, if you want to go on a mission, if you even want to go visit your family or take a vacation, you can't leave the monastery without first talking to Abbot Joel. Now, in our modern sensibilities, that seems backwards. It seems like an affront to your personal choice, your ability to do what you want. It seems oppressive, even. And so I asked one of the brothers, as politely as I could, I said, is that ever hard to kind of submit to someone else, even your biggest decisions? Is it difficult when Abbot Joel tells you something that you don't want to hear? And he said, oh, no, it's not oppressive. It's Abbot Joel. I trust him more than I trust myself, he said. When it comes to yielding before God, you might wonder, what if I don't like God's will? But remember, He's not a tyrant. This is your God. You trust Him more than you trust yourself. The man on the cross is trustworthy, the God who sacrificed everything for you. He's good. Paul said you were bought with a price. You are not your own. You were bought with a price. And you know what that price was because you're expensive. And He paid that price in blood. And if He's willing to do that for you, then He's proven trustworthy. He will not ask you to do anything that He hasn't already done Himself. And if that's true, then you can follow Him. Then you can listen to Him. Then you can even submit to Him. You can set aside your control and your preferences and your choice and say, Thy will be done. God, I yield to You. But you still might wonder, okay, that's fine, I get it. But what if, I'm afraid, what if God wants me to do something that I absolutely don't want to do? What if His will means something difficult for me or something impossible? Or what if I yield to Him and it means I need to suffer? Maybe. And when you do that, you yield to God and you even suffer, you can say, God, I don't like it, but I trust You. God, I don't want it, but I believe You. God, I don't understand it, but I love You. God, I don't see it. I don't see why You are causing me to do this. I don't see it, but I see You in the garden, on your knees, sweating blood, and praying to the Father. Father, not my will, but Your will be done. I see You. And I know Your will is good, ultimately. And I may not understand it, but I know You. And so, yeah, I will yield. I will trust. I will give. So this week, when you wake up in the morning, and it's 1 degree, maybe you have a morning routine. Maybe you drink your coffee, you have a quiet moment. Maybe you have a morning prayer or devotion. Let this be part of your routine this week. These 3 questions. Every morning this week, set these before yourself. And if you have any big decision to make, if you have any task ahead of you in this week, ponder these. God, what do you want? What do others need? What gifts do I have to share? And every morning this week, pray a very simple prayer. Lord, I yield to you. Amen.